Hey guys, I just want to take a few minutes and talk about what our strategies are when we're dealing with an injury or just a nagging pain that we just can't get rid of. What we know is if we let that nagging pain hang around, eventually it's going to lead to something catastrophic. So, the worst thing you can do is have the same issues going on month after month after month and just keep pushing through them. We see that a lot in people, and what we need to do is solve the root of the problem. But what we're going to talk about today is what to do if we kind of get to that point where we have an injury or we're really working to resolve something. So, let's first talk about RICE. This is a standard that still exists out in the sports world and a lot in fitness, and a lot of people just grew up hearing this acronym. It stands for rest, ice, compression, and elevation. The problem with this is it's not actually founded in science and research, and there's a few pieces here that can actually be detrimental and slow down the healing process. That is the rest and ice phase of it. So with rest, what we really need to do and what this protocol is all about is just blood flow. So when we completely rest, and we're going to have some rest in here, but we're going to talk about it a little differently. But when we completely rest, we're not getting the blood flow we need to pump the nutrients and the white blood cells into the injured area to really help us recover and then drain our lymphatic system to get all of that stuff out of there once it's done its job. Ice also kind of does the same thing. It restricts blood flow, so we're not getting the proper things to the area that need it, and then even when they're there, we can't get that stuff out. Ice also has something where it can make things seep into areas where it's not supposed to go. So both of these things can actually be detrimental to your recovery. So we want to talk about the full picture and just kind of how we want to frame our thinking when we're dealing with an injury or a nagging pain. So what we want to do just kind of overall is we first want to rest the injury. We don't want to rest your body. So what we're going to focus on is quality movement, blood flow with no pain and no compensation. So this is key. We are going to rest the injured area, but we're not going to rest the whole body. What we want is your heart pumping. We want muscle contractions to drain the lymphatic system. And we want this blood flow to really get going to aid our recovery. So we do that by getting our heart rate up. There's a million ways we can do this. If we're rehabbing an injured shoulder, we can work out one-armed on the other side. We can get on exercise bikes. There's squatting. There's a whole host of things that we can do to still exercise, maintain our fitness, but with the priority of getting blood flow. So what we want is elevated heart rates, muscle contractions. Compression helps a lot also. So what compression does, and you can wear sleeves, compression socks, you can do compression bands. What compression does is really help promote blood flow, and that's what it's all about. So step one is rest the injury, but rest does not mean do nothing. Rest means really do as much as you can, but prioritizing no pain, no compensation to the injured area. Next, we want to mobilize. We don't want, if we're having a shoulder issue, we don't want to just jam something right into the issue. Really what we want to do is look upstream and downstream. So like we talk about a lot when we're developing our flexibility, everything is related, and we have these very specific chains that are related to one another. So if I'm dealing with an injury in the front of the shoulder, for example, we know the forearm, the inside part of that elbow, the bicep into the chest and through to the other side is one chain that's all linked together. So if I can find areas of restriction in any of these areas, think of it like a rope with a bunch of knots in it. I can undo some of those knots and it can give this area some room to breathe. That way it's not constantly getting tugged on. So mobilizing, we want to look upstream and downstream, and we want to work on making sure that we've developed the range of motion and stability in the area that we need. So we want to give us some slack for the area to recover. From there, we want to repattern. So this goes back to posture, squat, push-up, jump. We want to figure out what we are doing incorrectly that we can fix and how we can train that position to then be in a good position. What we see a lot, and we'll just keep talking about the shoulder here, but what I see a lot is people come up and they say they've got pain in the front of their shoulder, and it happens when they raise their arm up over their head. So what I do is I get them to brace their core correctly, set up, lift their arm up over their head with a stable shoulder. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time what we see is it doesn't hurt this way. Their next reaction is, well, it hurts when I do that. But this is a motor pattern we don't want to do. So the motor patterns we're training over and over and over again in the gym are the same motor patterns we want to use day in, day out in real life. So we want our brain to eventually just fire when we pick our arm up. We draw in, we kegel, we squeeze our butt cheeks, we twist our feet on the floor, rib cage down, stand tall, shoulders back, create that torque in the shoulder for stability and lift up. So what happens a lot of times is people who are dealing with these impingements and injuries, when they do things perfectly, there's no pain. So that's what we're going for. No pain, no compensation. When you're dealing with an injury, this can actually be a very valuable time where you can learn a lot. So say if you move perfectly, no pain, no compensation, and if we get out of whack a little bit, it hurts. Now it's like wearing a shock collar. So now if we actually put you practicing lifting your arm perfectly and then slowly moving you in to using more and more weight and designing a program to repattern you, we actually have this thing that now if you get out of line, it hurts. It's like getting shocked. And so you can really feel where those good patterns are. So it all goes back to posture, squat, push up, and a jump. And an injury can be a great kind of time to come back to the foundation, build that back up, because that's really the foundation we need later on to stay injury free and also for the elite performance we're looking for. Then we want to strengthen the area. So a lot of people have injuries, they go in, they see a physical therapist or a chiropractor, they come back to the gym and they have all these exercises. They have a band they're going to do this way and this way and this way. That's the primary thing they're really focusing on. They get some body work with the therapist, and then they come in, they have their strengthening exercises. So strengthen is a big part of this, but we got to tie it in and we got to do the right thing. So if we're having a shoulder issue, our shoulders cannot be stable without a stable core. So it's not just doing exercises that somebody gives you. We've got to do the exercises with a purpose. Just like we have to do push-ups, a squat, and a jump with a purpose, and then everything else ties back into this stuff. So what are we doing? We're going to draw in. We're going to get nice and tight, everything we always talk about. Shoulders are back. We're creating that rotation. And then, so we're trying to strengthen the positions that we need to use. If we identify weak areas, then that's where we need to strengthen. What we see over and over and over again in here is really rarely is it an issue with the muscle not being strong enough. Most of the time, it's a coordination issue, and your brain, every time your brain tells you to move this way or this way, we fire the movement pattern the wrong way. So the strengthen is kind of tied directly into this repattern phase. We want to strengthen in the positions that we want to use later. The positions that our joints, muscles, and tissues were designed to be used for a lifetime, we don't know how long they're designed to be used this way. So if we're doing our exercises in a bad way, we're just reinforcing bad patterns that are going to lead right back to the exact same injuries. So it all comes back to blood flow, moving with no pain, no compensation, and then relearning, taking everything back, letting this be a learning experience to really put our focus back and see why it matters so much that we were working on our posture in the gym, outside the gym every single day, and we're learning how to move through the squat, the push-up, and the jump, and we're learning to link everything back to those things. So one last thing, what do we do if even when I get into a good position, it hurts? We move at a limited range of motion now. So if I can go to here before it hurts, and if I go like this, it doesn't hurt, we're not going to move that way. So that would be compensation. But if I'm moving perfectly and I come up and it starts to hurt right here, then what I'm going to do is not do that. The rule is no pain and no compensation. Something I can do, I can still repattern and strengthen the area by moving to a point with no pain and developing shorter ranges of motion. So that would be fine in this case. And once the area has rested and healed enough through this, then we can tie back in fuller and fuller ranges of motion, then slowly and slowly adding back in the intensity with the perfect movement. All right, so if you're injured, stay away from complete do-nothing rest. Don't use ice. What we're looking for is rest the injured body part, maximize blood flow, do mobility upstream and downstream, working on range of motion and giving the area some slack, repattern, learn, see if there's anything that you're doing wrong in the basics and the foundations of how we move, and we can use this opportunity to fix it, and then strengthen your muscles and tissues in those motor patterns. All right, good luck.